into open session. Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me? Sometimes the mic doesn't work so well. See some nods, thumbs up from the back. Okay, great. I see that many of you know the drill and have already filled out your little yellow public comment cards. It's not mandatory, but it helps me manage the meeting, so thank you for doing that. So we do have some announcements regarding reportable action from closed session. And first off, we did approve the personnel summary, and a copy of that summary is in the back of the room if you'd like to take a look. Secondly, in regards to item 4C, the board approved confidential settlement OAH number 2017-031-334 in the amount of $35,000. And thirdly, in regards to item 4D, the board approved confidential settlement agreement number 2017.03 for $30,000 per year for 2 years. That is our report from closed session. Now we need to approve the agenda, including time limits. Does anyone have anything they want to say about the agenda? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve it. Yeah. Yep. That's consent. Yep. Okay. So, would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda, including time limits?
So
I move to approve the.
Sorry, Leslie. You do go first.
That was fine. It's all yours. I'll second it.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 I'm assuming there's no public comment on the agenda. I should probably have asked. Yes, sir.
No, agenda, but just in general.
Yes, so that's, you're coming. We're coming. Yeah.
There's an item on the consent agenda for the minutes.
Yes.
That I would like to
Yes.
comment on later. Is that going to be,
We will. You're coming right up.
okay?
Yeah. So the next item, number 8, is public comment on the consent agenda. So do we have public comment on the consent agenda? That's you right there, Laura.
Yes.
So you could approach the mic, and you know you have 3 minutes. Just tell us which item you want to talk about, and Lars will help you manage your time.
Very good. My name is Laura Effel. I live in Larkspur. My comment is on the minutes for July 18th, which contained a statement that I thought was, it turns out misleading, but as it was stated, it was simply false. It said that, and this was picked up, by the way, by the IJ, that there was a 35% increase in enrollment anticipated. And right now, going forward from here, for the next 3 years, it's a much, much smaller increase in enrollment. As I've dug into this information, it turns out that the 35% increase is from a much earlier date. I don't know what that date is, but if you count from, I think, 2012 or 13, and go forward 3 years from now, perhaps there is a 35% increase in enrollment, but certainly not from now and in the next 3 years. That information was published in the IJ as if it were true and as if it dated from today, and it's misleading to the public. I think that needs to be corrected or explained so that it's not misleading. Now, I think it is also an important issue because it does explain what's really a problem in this district, which is something that Mr. Futterman referred to in the last meeting, and that is deficit spending. This board should be focusing on deficit spending and getting that under control, and devising a budget that's sustainable, rather than focusing on a huge construction project. Both of those items will have to be put before the voters. And your priority should be a sustainable budget.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. David, do you have any comment on, it's on that public comment on the minutes? We haven't approved them yet.
Just in general, with regards to the minutes themselves are a record of a board meeting and are for purposes of the board and shared with the public. And so in regards to the statements that are made, in terms of factual or not factual, again, they are for the purpose of the board and share with the public. So you have to go back and look at the phraseology of each statement, and if that's what the member recalls or that's what they feel was said, that's their statement. And that's how they've been done in the past, and not subject to public response or public scrutiny in terms of their accuracy. This is just sort of the historical summary of what took place.
Thank you.
So, sorry, I just want to say in the minutes, it's the consultant's last name is spelled incorrectly. It's G-O-L-U-B, not G-A-L-U-B. If you want, I'm happy to ask to move that.
I think that we should move the minutes off consent, and then we can talk about this more.
Fine.
That'd be
Whoever wants to ask for the minutes off consent.
okay. So hold on a second. We're jumping the gun here. Is there any other public comment on the consent agenda aside from the one we just heard? Okay. So now is the time in the meeting when we approve the consent agenda and pull things off of it to discuss during trustee considerations. And I am hearing that we should talk about item
16A.
16A. Thank you. So we are pulling 16A, which is the July 18th minutes. I got an email from Barbara that she'd like to pull items 16G and 16I. Would anyone else like to pull anything off of consent? Okay, so seeing no other motions to pull things off consent, I've got A, G, and I to pull under trustee considerations, but now would like a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda with the exceptions of 16A, G, and I.
Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you. Trustee reports. It's been 3 weeks since we met, but it is the middle of summer, so this might be brief. Anyone have anything to report?
I do.
Barbara, go for it.
I will now be representing CSBA at the State School Attendance Review Board. We are working on, and I think I've sent some copies to you, we are working on, CSBA is helping us work on board policy that will be offered statewide to boards, and I think we're making some headway on it. I'm very pleased to be able to continue work that I started in the 90s, so and thank you, all of you, for your support in doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. How often do you meet?
Once every quarter, so we'll be meeting next week.
And where do you usually meet?
Sacramento.
Sacramento.
And
Thank
all
you
those
for doing.
costs will be covered by CSBA.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else have anything to report?
Yeah, Leslie and I, the TFT survey committee members, met last week, and we decided to forge ahead and try to set up a meeting with the TFT leadership, hopefully the second week of school.
Great. You were Johnny on the spot, got going on that. Thank you. Anyone else? I have nothing to report either, so thank you. Moving on to Board President's report. I did have just a little thank you to all the people who've been working this summer, facilities and our technology crew. This is the time for them to work really hard, and I have seen them out there. Things look like they're moving along and will be in great shape for the start of school. So I just wanted to make sure that we expressed our appreciation for all the folks that are working their tails off to make sure that we're ready. So that is it for me. You're up.
Thank you. Also continuing the theme of brevity, also want to let everybody know that I think this was the first week that administration is starting their way back, so our campuses are starting to come alive again. I just had lunch with Vice President at College Marin today, Jonathan, and he says that they start school back up on the 21st, and I said we'll be 2 days behind you with our kids, so just a few weeks, it'll look a little more busy around here. So we'll enjoy the last few days of relative quietness as we gear up for this. Next week is really the beginning of the full PD week for the district. So Tara and her department will be in full force with many teachers with professional development. This Friday is the leadership retreat, so we welcome the union leadership at that event at the Marconi Center. And then Monday the 21st is all staff day. The board generally is present at that. And then first day of, and 21st is also solar eclipse, so don't forget, for all those enthusiasts, we've scheduled to end early so those can partake in the eclipse event. And then kids will be here on the 23rd, Wednesday. So we'll be here before we know it, by the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, great. Now we are at the point in the agenda for board communications.
Yes, a couple emails. We have one from Mr. Page, community member, dated July 17th, regarding campaign strategist. An email from Miss, and I apologize if I mispronounce this, Longinati, community member, dated July 18th, regarding facilities master plan and potential bond measure. Email from Mr. Wren, community member, dated July 18th, regarding voting no on new bond. Email from Miss Landy, community member, dated July 17th, regarding new parcel tax proposal. 2 emails from Mr. Richardson, community member, dated July 18th, regarding sub-club request. And an email from Mrs. Moyer, community member, dated July 19th, regarding sub-club request.
Okay, thank you. Is there any comment on board communications? I want to make sure that I have asked all of you guys. Sometimes we get memos in board communications that we see for the first time along with the public, but we don't have any of those this time. These are all email, so doesn't look like anyone has anything. So this is now time for public comment for items not on the agenda. I see 2 right here. I'm going to read aloud the protocol and then ask those who want to speak to approach the mic. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and provides this time for members of the audience to address the board on any school-related matter not on this agenda. The board can take no action at this time. Each speaker is requested to identify themselves prior to addressing the board and will be heard for up to 3 minutes. The presiding officer of the board shall determine, based on time constraints of the board, whether some time less than 3 minutes shall be allocated to individual speakers. Looks like we've only got 2, so you do get your full 3 minutes. I have I don't know which one wants to go first. I have Mimi and Ava. And if you don't have, yes, and thank you. The little yellow cards help us spell your name correctly. So somebody jump up first.
Well, you didn't mention my name, but I filled out a card, and it's Richard Marshall, and wanted to speak to you.
Do you have, I have you wanting to speak about an item that is on the agenda, item 15B? Yes, so that is, yes, that will come later. So,
But I want to speak to you about a different thing that's not on the agenda. So
oh, yes, then.
if that's okay, I'll
Yes.
it's quick. I wanted to thank you all very much for the decision last year to change all the sport fields in our district from rubber to cork. I thank you for the decision and how that process was handled. There was passion on both sides. I participated, as did many other people who weren't here, and I thought you handled it balancing the safety and health of the community versus your very important financial responsibilities with exceptional duty to the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could you come back every meeting, please?
Yeah, boy, was that nice. Okay, any more? Okay, yes. We have other folks that would like to talk about items that are not on the agenda. I see a Barbara Sullivan, Mimi, and Ava.
Hello, I'm Barbara Solomon from Corte Madera. I was here last month too, and I was an avid supporter of the Marin Public Schools for more than 20 years. I also worked on the 2001 and 2006 bond measures, where we resulted in years-long worth of construction and modernization on all 5 campuses. I'm here again tonight to say I am still stunned that the board is considering going out for a huge $450 million bond so soon after the last 2 bond measures were passed and completed. When we campaigned for the bond measures, we told the voters we would not be going out for another bond for 30 years, which is the lifetime of the bond. That's how long the property owners pay on the bond. To come back now with a bond that's going to double what the other ones were is astounding to me. So property owners are still going to be paying on the 2006 measure until 2036. I know you guys have already spent a lot of money on this process, but I think you really need to take a step back and think about what you're doing. As I said, I'm a tremendous supporter of the schools. I am not going to support this bond, and I've been canvassing a lot of my friends and associates, and not one person so far has been in favor of the bond. I would urge you strongly to talk to the prior superintendent and the trustees who carried out the bond and oversaw the construction, and get their input on it, because what we promised the voters back then really matters. You're going to lose the credibility of the district if you go back on your word on such an important issue. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yep.
Good evening, Mimi Willard. And just a brief word of thanks to Dr. Yoshihara, Daniel Minion, and the board members for helping expedite my understanding of your budget. Having spent a lot of time, not as much as they have, coming to an understanding of it, I think your operating deficit must be the district's top priority. You collectively need to identify the problem and the solution before you hire a consultant to sell it. Your operating deficit was $5 million this past year. It's projected to be accumulating at another $3 to $5 million per year, so that by the time you get out to 2020, you'll have reserves of about $12 million in place, which is not substantially above your statutory minimum. And meanwhile, your current parcel tax expires in 2022, July of 2022. So I think postponing prioritizing a deficit plan is very risky. Your most urgent priority must be to provide quality education. Buildings don't educate, teachers do. Now, parcel taxes aren't popular. They hurt those who own small homes and condos. But maybe a solution might be for the district to identify some budget cuts and ask the community to meet them halfway, accepting some small incremental parcel tax. Then tailor that proposal so it doesn't hurt your most vulnerable residents. Senior exemption, disabled exemption, low income exemption, which the city of Albany did for their schools, and 3% maximum escalators. Hold on. Here we go. And a reasonable sunset, 8 to 10 years, or whenever you think enrollment might be coming back down. You likely only get one bite of the apple. So I think it's imperative that you table the bond measure until you resolve the budget issues. It's not simply a matter of downsizing it. I think a really bad outcome would be new buildings and having to lay off teachers. So please, don't wait till 2020 to renew the parcel tax, which will be by then expiring in 18 months. What do you do if it fails? So 2018, I think, is the right window for the first try at a sensitively developed parcel tax. Establish a plan and priorities, then hire a consultant. Then hire your consultant, one who's respected by the community. maybe target November 2018, not June, so you are prepared with the optimal plan and a good chance of success. I think this is a sensible approach, and I hope you will adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ava.
Hi, thank you for hearing me. I apologize for not being better prepared. I had not expected to be here today. I got a call from the ACLU late today with regard to an issue I brought to David Yoshihara's attention some weeks ago. I have yet to receive a confirmation of receipt from him for correspondence that I sent on 7/14/17. This has been with regard to the surprising racial segregation, or actually just blocking, of black children from the Tamalpais High School pool. I've been in touch with alumni from Tam High, class of 59, class of 62, class of 72, class of 75, and let me add the class of 74. I myself went to Tam in the 1980s, and we all recall using the Tam High pool. It was racially integrated. It was a very low fee. And I'd say, to my memory, it was about 1/3 black kids. And we all had a great time. It was very safe. There was racial tension back then, but certainly not at the pool. I was shocked when I returned 5 years ago to Marin County from New York and San Francisco to learn that, as I understood it, the pool had been racially segregated, the open swim during the summer. And as it turned out, I was utterly wrong. There is no access to working class and lower class black kids from Marin City to the only pool they have in their area, except for the separate but equal pool that's now being touted for their use, which is the Mill Valley Community Center. I was very disappointed to learn this. In New York, my swim club recruited out of Harlem and Brooklyn in a very short time. We sent Leah Neal to the Olympics. She's been to 2 Olympics. She swims for Stanford now, and she's won multiple medals, and it is baffling to me that a county with such rich resources and the most splendid pools I've seen in California, remarkable pools, so much better than what we had, has, to my knowledge, not produced any Olympic medalists. Thank you very much, Mr. Christensen. Today, in the call I received from the ACLU, they pointed me to the California Law Code EDC section, EDC code, and it would be 38134 parentheses D, which regards the unaffordability that is currently in place at the Tam High Pool during the summer. You're charging $295 a week, thank you, sir, for a 4-day summer swim camp. The swim team is even more expensive and exclusive because parents must be involved. And 38134D of the California Law Code states that that must not exceed $60 for a 1-month period. You are far in excess. And apparently, according to the people I've talked to in Marin City, this restriction has been going on for decades. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Do you have we would like to get back to you on this. I have just your street address. Would you mind putting down an email address?
I would be happy to, but I might recommend that Dr. Yoshihara should forward my communications that I have been sending since I met with Mr. Christensen in person on, I believe, June 29th. I have sent multiple emails to Dr. Yoshihara, and apparently he has not sent them to you? I'm not sure. Please, would you be willing to do that, David?
We have her email.
Will you send them the correspondence, or do I need to send them to them directly? Because I think it's your responsibility to pass those on. This is a civil rights issue, and it's also a matter of the California Law Code.
I will review the emails for that and send the ones that I've received to the board as per your request.
Okay. Perhaps I should just do it directly so you need not review them first? That would be faster.
Please remain in your civility. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay, thank you. We are now on to trustee considerations. The first one is our report on goals, and that is Dr. Topier. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight, I just wanted to speak to you to bring you up to speed on some of the work of our ongoing attendance committee. Starting with this school year, districts are required to report chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is any student missing 10% or more of the school days in a year, and that is regardless of type of absence. So whether or not that is excused or unexcused. So if a student misses 18 or more days a year, they are considered chronically absent, so for any reason. That is one of the target populations that we are looking at in our committee. Specifically, the committee will be bringing forth, hopefully in November, the latest January, a recommendation for adopting a new board policy that specifically addresses chronic absenteeism with some measures to hopefully mitigate. So what I wanted to share tonight too was our percentages. So in 15-16, we had a rate of 13% of chronic absenteeism, which equated to 581 students out of roughly 4,500 students who missed 18 or more school days. In 16-17, it was also 13%, but because we have a larger population, it was a higher number. That was 610 students who were chronically absent. Unfortunately, this also turns into an equity issue, as our low SES and our African American students have the highest rate of chronic absenteeism, with 38% and 30% respectively.
What was the second number?
30%. So that was in 2016-17, 38% of our low socioeconomic students were chronically absent, and 30% of our African American students were chronically absent. As we know from some of our achievement and opportunity gaps, those align. So some of our most vulnerable student groups are missing more than 10% of the school each year, which is damaging for all of us. So that is some of our important work that we're doing. The attendance committee, as we convened last year, has a timeline. We are visiting school sites in August and September to share our proposed board policies and to get feedback. We'll be reviewing feedback. We're also going to make these board policies available to the public to review and to provide feedback. They'll be available on our website, and we'll send something out explaining that. Final draft is due in December for hopefully submission for a January board approval. These policies would likely take effect June 30th of next year.
Thank you. Any questions for Tara on the update on the attendance committee?
Tara, can you give us, is there going to be a different approach in terms of addressing attendance to the parents and the students at the beginning of this year?
So what we know is that communication from schools is very important, and that the parents understand that it is a priority of the school. So beginning last year, we did start increasing communication from the principals at the very beginning of the school year, emphasizing attendance policy, emphasizing the importance of attendance. This year we'll be sending out something reminding parents of chronic absenteeism. We do hope that our new district app that we'll be launching this year, which allows parents to check attendance right on their smartphone, might also increase. One thing we know from research is that parents often don't necessarily know the full ramification. They think, oh, when you say to them, your student's has missed 18 days, many parents are surprised because they're excusing a day here and a day there. But when they start to add up, so early notification. The app also allows parents to set a bar. So once my student has X number of absences, I get a notification. So we think increased communication is one way to communicate, the importance of being in school. The other approaches that we also know from research is that punitive measures don't work, but incentives do.
Are teachers, particularly our new teachers, apprised of some of the ways in which they can be more responsible for the youngster who's not there?
Yeah, that's part of what, it's an overarching classroom management thing that we
Yes.
speak about.
Yes.
Our message is always proactive, not reactive. For my years in the classroom, it was always much better if I was catching the parents on the front end of something than the back end. So that is something that we share, that, communicating early and often and building a partnership with the family, that's what you're really trying to collectively problem solve and help support the student to be present more often.
I have a question. You said that incentive measures work better than punitive. And my experience when my older child was in high school 10 years ago, there were some real consequences if a student had exceeded, it was actually a pretty narrow window, and they would lose, as I recall, credits. So you could look at that as an incentive to not lose credits, or as a punitive action to lose to lose them. And my I have no data behind it, but it didn't seem like that was an issue back in 2007 like it is now. People were pretty nervous about missing school, and parents were very clear that if they were to write a letter, they were basically lying. And it gave parents pause in writing a letter to miss school to go on a trip or what have you. Do you not agree with that, or you've seen it different?
What the data that I have indicated was that the policy of reducing credit had a much more severe impact on our low socioeconomic students as well as our English language learners. Preponderance of the students who lost credit fell into those categories.
Oh, that's
we
good
did have
information to
fewer
have.
unexcused
Okay.
absences.
Uh-huh.
Absenteeism in every category has gone up over the last 7 years. So excused absences have also risen.
Wow.
So I think it's a...
So it's more complex.
It's more complex
Very
than
much
that,
more
yeah.
complex than.
So I think
Okay.
it would probably reduce unexcused absences for certain populations of students,
Yeah. No,
which is not really the
that's
problem we're
not-
trying to solve.
No, that's not the problem. Thank you for that. It helps.
Barbara, I have seen in more recent years a much greater willingness on the part of parents to write excuses for their kids to stay home from school to catch up on homework that they haven't done. And it has a tremendous impact on classes, not just with tests, but particularly when there are oral presentations to be done. And you have, one or two kids in a team, or kids don't show up when it's scheduled, and then it throws the class, that it's supposed to happen, the presentations are supposed to happen on Tuesday. And then you've got a third of your kids who aren't there, and then you have to put those presentations off for another day when you were planning other instruction. It's really, really, really disruptive. But these are, very often, this is the case of educated parents who don't want their kids to get a bad grade, so they write the excuse. And the kids who come from less educated families whose parents haven't been through college, don't know the system, they don't write the excuses. And when we have punitive measures, it falls on the SES kids, really disproportionately.
Tara, I forgot who is on the attendance committee.
Me, Wes Cedros, Lysandra White, Chad Stewart, Tanya Jaspering, and there's a teacher from Redwood,
I didn't mean
John
to put
Weller.
Okay. I threw you a curveball. I didn't mean to.
And maybe David Luongo, but and David Luongo.
And how often do they meet?
We meet every we had met every 4 to 6 weeks. We met 5 times in last year. Our meeting time is a little more condensed this fall because we're trying to get through, but we don't have another meeting until we're going to have one meeting, but then we're going to gather feedback, and then we'll have a series of meetings to respond to the feedback and come back with changes.
And will you collaborate? I'm just thinking about what Barbara shared with us. during her trustee update. She was appointed to the state.
Yes, and I
Yeah.
sent it to
You
Barbara's
guys
been
are
sharing,
talking.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of
Great.
resources. The state has a lot of resources, which is really helpful.
I have another question. I know that John Weller did his master's thesis on attendance. Has that material been considered in the committee?
Yeah, he's on the committee. So one of the things we did was review a lot of data and research, and some of the research we reviewed was his.
Great, thank you.
Please convey our thanks to the committee. I know we will be seeing them again in November, December, January, somewhere, but
Late fall, early winter.
late fall, early winter. Okay, well, tell them to keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And you too. Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item? Nope? Okay.
I'll say it's good to be talking about students and not money.
Yes. Did you hear Chuck's comment? Can you hear Chuck in his microphone?
It's
Chuck,
good-
lift it up
it's
so
good to
people.
hear I'm sorry. It's good to hear about students and not money.
Yes. That is why we put this agenda item first at every meeting, so we are all focused on
Yeah.
our most important job, which is educating our students. So thank you for that. Okay, item B is to approve the contract between Whitehurst Mosher and the district.
Thank you, members of the board. At the last meeting, the board had approved Superintendent the authority to work with Whitehurst Mosher in negotiation of a contract. And what you have tonight before you is the proposal for the contract. There are two minor changes that I'm aware of that I want to bring the board's attention for consideration. First one is with regards to the date of the contract at the very beginning. We will change that to whichever date, if and when the board approves the contract. So if it's tonight, if it's a different date. So it will not be a predated year or date on that amount. The other one, with regards to that and some of the questions that arose, in regards to I think it's section 3.1. The commitment to the $20,000 amount came up a couple times, and I do want to share that with the public, the board is very diligent in regards to asking their questions, and we appreciate that. And this one came up a couple times. And in checking with them, the rationale behind this is as a company, and they did say that they're a smaller firm, is that when they commit to us, by doing so, they've committed resources. So they've committed people and committed time to working with the district, and by so doing, they have turned down potentially and potentially walked away from other offers of work. And so that's really where their rationale is. And if they were not to do that, they could overstretch. And so that's a risk they take in doing work with us, and that is for that particular piece. And the last one I do want to bring is with regards to the essentially the penalty for late payments. I will work with fiscal services with regards to typically how long they need to issue payment, but it is not unusual for firms, particularly credit card agencies, but other firms, if we are late on a payment, to assess some type of service fee, again, because they have obligations as well. But for us, whether that's net 30, net 45, or net 60, I'll work with what fiscal does, and we'll bring back to them in terms of how long they really need in regards to issuing payment. But that section has to do with timely payments to them, and I can see the rationale with wanting to be paid timely, but also working with our district in terms of how long they need for accounts payable to issue payment. So those are the three that I know we want change. So the first one certainly around the date, and the second one around the terms of how long for payment. So then I know there are some speakers on this. I'm happy to answer questions, and then when President Anderson is ready to certainly let the speakers share their thoughts on this item.
Are there any questions for Dr. Yoshihara on this item?
Well, I have a lot, but somebody else go ahead. I have to get organized here.
My questions were answered for the most part. Thank you for incorporating them into your lead-in.
I guess I have a couple general questions. Thank you for answering the response to the 20,000.
Yes.
I still don't agree. I work all the time with very small firms, and that's the risks small firms take. And if I had known this, I would have said, let's not go to a small firm. The other part of this was that the scope is incredibly, it's unclear to me what they're really doing, what deliverable we'll get. It's basically a fixed price contract where we say that we're obligated to pay a lump, sum of money, but we're giving them equal payment every month. And there's no way of knowing what we're expecting them to do each month in order to approve the invoices. I really have a problem with the 1.5%. I think the contract is really in their favor, not the district's. I don't understand their COI language, and I don't understand why the district doesn't have a boilerplate contract for professional services, because this reads like it definitely reads like their contract. Government agencies work with small businesses all the time, and they usually get credit for it. Sometimes you'll get a 2-person shop. But the other part of it was last time when we approved you going to negotiation, I know I said, and I think others said, we were very uncomfortable because we hadn't seen the scope, and the way she described the scope was it's not like what I'm seeing here. Sure. So I'm not only having problems with the contract, but I have to tell you, I'm not going to be able to vote for it because I'm having problems with the process, and I don't think we're ready to hire this consultant, and I'm happy to describe why. But I'll let others, I'll do that after we talk about the contract. I'm just really disappointed in the shape this is in. And,
Yeah.
I think public, when we're working on contracts with public funds, we have an obligation to be even more rigorous. And granted, I don't have experience with school contracts, but I have a lot of experience with local, state, and federal contracts. And I've never seen one quite like this, that's in favor of the contractor quite so much.
Sure. Certainly it's up to the board in terms of their action. What I would propose is with Leslie to have a conversation with you and representatives of the firm afterwards and answer your questions to the extent that you feel informed with regards to what you brought forward, and then come back at a future meeting to approve the contract. Typically, when we are dealing with contracts of any of our firms, consulting firms and otherwise, the power is vested in the superintendent to have those conversations and bring forward a contract in good faith to the board. So certainly I want to be able to answer the board's questions, and if you feel they haven't been answered, I want to continue to have that opportunity, but not to use the public forum as that place to exchange the questions. Those should be answered outside of that realm, and we bring back a contract to the board in good faith with regards to that.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I just will not agree to paying them $20,000 if we change our mind in a month, and not agree that we can't hire somebody else, a person or a company that does similar work. But moreover, I agree with what we've been hearing, and the reason why is that I was writing this down because I hear this a lot. I mean, I think we've all heard it. I don't think the public realizes that back in 2016, you put together a budget committee. The very first thing this district did was to look at where we can cut costs. That message has never gotten out. You spent a lot of time doing that, and since that time, the district has moved forward and done more work to evaluate areas to cut costs. We've had Tara involved with looking at classroom sizes, we looked at special education, we looked at programs, and we have been cutting those. So we did start there. Then in the fall, when we realized after looking at projections that this was looking pretty dire, but just cutting the costs was not necessarily going to make it, we had a pollster come. We brought a pollster, and the pollster during that time, we talked about the fact we had to decide on a timeline. We talked about, do we need parcel or bond? We even talked about the very comments we're getting that, gee, what if it's just an increase of enrollment 5 years and it drops? That's going to impact how many staff we have to hire. It's going to impact whether we have permanent housing. We talked all about this in November. And then we even said, let's wait until the FMP comes back with demographics so we can make a more educated decision. Let's meet then and talk. Do we want a parcel or bond or neither? And that got lost. And then during that time, he brought us a timeline that we'd been asking for. So we had a really good sense of what it would take, what we had to do to get done to go out in November. Then we asked for a timeline again, and we were told, no, the next consultant, the FMP, is going to give us a timeline. He did. He gave us a timeline. The last meeting, this new person said she was going to give us a timeline. And, you know, we and as a board, we even recently, the last 2 meetings, we've said, you know, I think we're more concerned about losing our teachers because we have all this interim housing. So we have this important information for the public to understand that we're working on this. And then the pollsters had suggested, and we all thought, what a great idea. Let's go out and do a poll and find out what does the public think. We hear from many people. What do they really think? What do they care about? Teachers, new classrooms, or what do they think? And then get a political consultant. But then all of a sudden we're talking to a political consultant. And then I see a scope of work that is just so vague. And I'm a consultant, and so I feel like I can say this. There's that old saying, you hire a consultant, they borrow your watch, and they tell you what time it is. And that's where I think we are right now. I think this board ought to have a meeting, a workshop, and we talk about what our priority is in terms of the teachers or bond, or actually not even bond, facilities, and look at the timeline and the information we've already gotten from very, very reputable people, and decide how we want to move forward. I'm not ready to go turn around and pay another consultant until I'm convinced that this district can manage consultants, figure out what a scope of work is, hold their line to the fire, and not pay them $20,000 because they're a small company. And I'm really sorry, but I'm getting so frustrated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would agree with that. I look at that 20,000, it just drops my jaw. That we had a document that came to us originally with the word neutralized that was never really addressed. We had to address it publicly. How we ever got that document with that language in it to begin with concerns me. And it does speak to the fact that we don't have a particular, as you say, a boilerplate for professional contracts for how they should come to us and what we can expect. I agree that this contract is in favor of the company, and the other problem I'm having with it is client. You're the client, we're not the client.
The other thing I want to say is I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're the client, David. It says in this contract that you are the client.
Yes, I represent the district in contracts.
That's not clear, though, here. It says you are the client.
Yoshihara is the superintendent of the Tamalpais School District, hereinafter referred to as client.
Yeah. And I just, we're the ones that have to sign on the bottom line here. That's not clear. This kind of, I'm not confident that this is the right time, nor is this the right company to be moving forward with this.
And one clarification, we have never said, yeah, we're going to go out for a $450 million bond. And I don't know why no one is, we got that in our lap as well. And then we were reassured that these are not verbatim projects. These are things to consider. We may only pick one project. And then we all even said, gee, this is awfully large. And then we asked the consultant, help us prioritize. Can you prioritize according to safety, ADA? Prioritize those projects. We still haven't done that. So we just go from one thing to the next with no plan, or a plan that we kind of put together as we go, and then look back and go, oops, we already talked about that. We had that figured out 6 months ago and forgot. So I'm not ready to sign the public funds on again for a sum of money unless someone can really explain to me what deliverable we're going to get. And I don't think we need it right now. I think the board needs to have a workshop, and we need just to talk and bring up all the information we've already got and look at it.
Is there any other comment from the board or questions for David?
Well, are we going to have public comment?
Yes.
Right? I mean, I thought we were going to have questions.
Questions, this is supposed to be questions from the board, and then we have public comment, and then we have discussion. Okay. Any other questions?
No, not a question.
Okay, so now we have public comment. I have 3 here. Thank you, Lars, for being our timekeeper. I don't know who wants to go first. I have Richard, Mimi, and Laura who signed up, but other people are welcome to sign up.
My name's Richard Marshall. I'm a math teacher at Drake High School, but tonight I speak only for myself, and I do not pretend to have any knowledge of our district's needs or any information about this particular company. I live in Mill Valley, and my daughter drove to Tamalpais High School this last year, and she found a bush to park in at the top of Gomez, because there's no student parking really at all. I mean, might be a few spots. When the bush was filled, she would illegally park at the Safeway parking lot. There's solutions to this, but the huge ticket item of a parking garage at Tam High would be a great thing. You guys have to make decisions about that. I'm not trying to influence you one way or the other. Mostly I came down tonight as a warning. I've been involved for the last couple of weeks on a political discussion in Mill Valley concerning the restriping of Miller Avenue, which I live on. And it's become a real big hot button item down there. I'm kind of naive when it comes to social media. I'm not a Facebook person at all. If you look on Google, I don't think I actually exist. But boy, was I educated in the last couple of weeks. I don't want to name names or even go into specifics, but people creating blogs, people quoting from the blogs. Make yourself bulletproof before you go forward, because you're good people from the community with very real skills that you bring to the table. Well, so is the Mill Valley City Council. And the words used to describe them, incompetent, corrupt, they're none of those things. Their behavior was described as illegal. I was amazed at how effective a small number of people can be to influence public opinion and to twist things around. So if you leave yourselves any vulnerability, and in a school district there's always vulnerabilities, there's differences between teachers and administration and the district office and the sites and stuff. If teachers don't get upset about their admin once in a while, I don't think they care enough. They should be upset once in a while. Any little divisions will be seized upon. So make yourself bulletproof before you go forward. I think bond measure would be great. Do it right, and thank you for pursuing it and making sure you're doing it right. Thanks.
Thank you. Stop.
Hi, Barbara Solomon again. You guys have a really hard job to do, and I do want to pay my respects to you, because I can see you're really struggling with these issues, and I empathize with you. My own feeling is, as long as we have Proposition 13, we're never going to have state-of-the-art schools. You cannot make up for 40 years of neglect and underfunded facility funding in one generation.
Can you speak a little closer to the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said, as long as you have Prop 13, you're never going to have state-of-the-art schools. You can't make up for 40 years of neglect and underfunded facilities in one generation. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here. And, you know, I just really think the community's going to fight back against it. So, in my view, I think it's premature, wasteful, and potentially improper for the board to hire this campaign strategist at this time when it has not even approved the facilities master plan or set its own goals and priorities with regard to new revenue and facilities. I know you've already spent maybe $200,000 or so on this process, and with this contract and the opinion survey, that's another, what, $60,000, $70,000? That $246,000 could have gone to pay for 4 teachers or so to deal with the projected surge in enrollment. I think it would be money better spent. I know you have to make some tough decisions, and I think you just need to to show strong pragmatic leadership and not resort to expensive consultants. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up.
Laura Effel again. I am heartened by Leslie Lundgren's comments on the hiring of this consultant. I think this is putting the cart before the horse. And I have been here on 2 separate occasions for other meetings. And both times I've asked that this board tell us what their priorities are. It's not the time to go out and ask the public what they want to pay for until you decide what the most important priorities are. And hiring this consultant is not going to get you there. You need to decide what's important, and it looks to me like making sure you have enough teachers for the period when this enrollment is expanding, and making sure you have the money to pay for it and not run out of your surplus funds is your most important priority. And creating a sustainable budget for a period that you know you're going to have increased expenses ought to be your first priority. And I think that if you're truthful with the public, you're more likely to get their support. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm here tonight to urge you not to approve the Whitehurst-Mosher contract tonight and not to approve it at all. As I've indicated previously tonight, I think it's important for you to set your priorities before moving forward. That will contribute to the best outcome for everybody in the district and will deliver the greatest efficiency of return on your money invested in the process. If, as you go all the way through, looking at, as I hope you will do in a board workshop, looking at your options and defining your needs, if it turns out that you need to hire a consultant, I would strongly urge you to look to number 2. Dr. Yoshihara said at the last board meeting that there were 3 good candidates. I think the first one has disqualified herself. And basically what happens if you hire Whitehurst-Mosher is that instead of starting at the starting blocks in your race to try to get the money that you need to provide the education that you want, you're not starting at the starting blocks. You're starting like a half a mile behind them because this person has created a credibility problem for the district. And that's because, and I'm just the messenger, don't shoot the messenger, but this neutralize the opposition is going to become something that just doesn't go away. And why put yourself in that position if it's hard enough to get a ballot measure passed? Further, the consultants always represent themselves as I'm not just here to sell a particular ballot measure, I'm here to help build community consensus. This person can't deliver on that imperative. And finally, I'd like to say that as I see what's happening tonight, this contract isn't ready to be approved. There are some blanks that need to be filled in. You kind of pre-approved a hiring last week. It would be, that, in my opinion, was in bad form. I think it would be in worse form to go ahead and pre-approve again with some important items really not clarified. I guess in conclusion, I hope that you will table this particular contract for now, define what you need to do. If that involves needing a consultant, then choose the one who's most likely to succeed for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, now is the time to discuss.
Real quick question. This contract doesn't include the pollster, as I recall. She said that's a separate contract, so that's another $30-something thousand potentially.
In that range, correct.
Okay, this is the time for the board to discuss this item. We have asked clarifying questions and heard public comment. Is there any further discussion? We heard from Leslie and Barbara. They asked a bunch of questions. Do you two have any questions?
I don't
or
have questions. I
comments
have
or
comments.
discussion?
He said he has comments.
Yeah.
I didn't know if
Go
you-
ahead.
Comments. One, I don't think we can proceed with a divided board on this. I think that the board has to be absolutely unanimous. That's number one. Number two, I disagree, at least in part, with Laura's comment. I don't think this is putting the cart before the horse. I think it is putting the horse before the cart, but I think there are already a lot of horses before the cart. We don't need we don't need a political consultant to set our priorities. You know, I'm very clear in my mind what we need, and what we need is at least a modest parcel tax to pay the bills, so that we don't end up in 2022 broke with in a receivership and having to lay off tons of people. So I think that a parcel tax, which I believe is absolutely necessary. How much, I don't know, but it's we absolutely need a parcel tax. I think that if we do go out for a parcel tax in November of 2018, we do need to have a political consultant on board by December. But the decision as to whether to do a parcel tax or to do a bond, that's something I think the board can make without political consultancy and without polling. We need to look at our needs, and our needs are really, really, really obvious. We are heading towards a fiscal cliff. I put a much higher priority, and I don't think this is an issue of teachers or classrooms. I think that we need both. Do I think we need a $300 million bond? No, I don't. Do I think we need a $17 million two-story parking garage? No, I don't. Do I think we need a lot of these other things that were in the FMP? No, I don't. But we do need some additional classroom space. Maybe that can be accomplished with a parcel tax. Maybe that can come out of a parcel tax, or maybe we can do a bond after the parcel tax that is more modest in scope. With respect to the parcel tax, I've said it before, if we did the 300, which I just don't see, but if we did do the $300 million, that would take us up to our limit. And then should a natural disaster occur, should we have an earthquake, do we have a bonding capacity to rebuild? I think that needs to be considered. That's one of the reasons that we've carried for years and years and years a huge budget surplus, because at some point, at some time, maybe not in our lifetimes, Mill Valley is going to burn down. It's just a given. Other parts of the county may burn down. There will be an earthquake. That's going to wipe out the tax base. We need to have a cushion. And we need to have a cushion with our ability to rebuild. We need to have a cushion in our ability to continue operations when things really, really, really go south. But tonight, I just don't sense enough of a consensus that we can enthusiastically move forward. And I think this board needs to move forward in lockstep, in total agreement on this kind of thing.
Thank you, Chuck. You always add a little bit of optimism to the discussion.
Yeah.
Michael, we haven't heard from you.
Yeah, I'm frustrated, to be honest. We had a unanimous vote last time to retain someone, and now we don't anymore. So I do actually understand Leslie's concerns about specifically the deliverables in the contract. And I think that's fine. I think that merits a discussion with the consultants so everybody's, before we sign any kind of agreement, so to make sure that everybody's clear in terms of what we expect. I also share concerns about the fact that on the facility side, I think we need to have a discussion that talks about sort of prioritizing. In other words, we've been given sort of a $300 million proposal, which is obviously an expensive proposal, and we should have a discussion about, when we're talking about facilities, what would the priorities be based on whatever criteria we've talked about. You know, there was mentioned before about, you know, health and safety, for example. But we certainly have, you know, I don't think it's sort of an either or proposition in that the facilities impact teaching and learning, just like the numbers of teachers and the quality of teachers and the amount that we can pay our teachers has an impact on teaching and learning. And if you look at the teacher survey, you see there's a lot of concern expressed with respect to our facilities by our teachers and its impact on teaching and learning. And I think Chuck gave an example at the last meeting about that in terms of teachers moving among classrooms and students not being able to find their teachers to ask questions, those kinds of things. So I don't think it's an either or proposition. My concern is that I think having a consultant on board will help frankly drive the discussion. That's what I think. And I think sort of further delaying, and they certainly bring in the expertise that we don't have on staff. So I think that if we can get comfortable with the scope of what we expect of them, then I think that will help, because I think we've floundered a little bit with regard to progress on some of this stuff, and I think this would help. Again, I think this is expertise that we don't have on staff. You know, I went back and looked at, you know, Leslie, we were operating in parallel to some extent, I think, because I went back and looked at some of the reports that we had before on issues related to what I would call, broadly speaking, the enrollment growth issues, right? And what I ended up focusing most on was our June 21st, 2016 meeting, and I really encourage, you know, for those members of the public who've really taken the time to dig into these issues, which I very much appreciate, it's really worth going back and looking at the report of the Enrollment Growth Committee on June 21st, 2016. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes and just talk about that, if I will, because I think it's great having, because I think we kind of forget sort of all the things all the discussions that we've had and what we've learned. So that was a committee that was run by Sally, our former chief business officer, and you know, she presented the report that was presented on June 21st was sort of a summary of the process that the committee had gone through. The committee had 17 members. It went through several different meetings. It reviewed enrollment growth and staffing projections from the year 2020 through 2021. You know, I would say, and interestingly, included a lot of statistics, you know, with respect to the district. So among the statistics it included was that in the year 2001 we had 3,582 students. In the year 2015-16 we've had 4,462 students. So that's already an increase of 25%, with obviously projected, you know, continuing increases through at least 2021. But they talked about, and among the things they talked about, for example, on the revenue side there was a recommendation that arose from that enrollment growth committee that said, let's look at developer fees, right? So one of the things that we've done in terms of increasing revenue, addressing the fiscal situation we have, is that we've pursued developer fees under superintendent and negotiations with our feeder districts and so forth, and that's bringing in additional money from developer fees, and we thank you for that. The problem, of course, is that's only $200,000 a year, right? Which is not going to pay for a 25% increase in enrollment over that period of time, and another, you know, additional enrollment increase since then. But that's one of the things we looked at. They looked at bonding capacity. They looked at potentially selling property that the district owns in San Geronimo, but they determined that the process was that it was not, for a variety of reasons, that it was really not a viable alternative. They discussed the parcel tax, right, which we're potentially discussing now. They discussed classroom utilization. They spent a lot of time talking about construction, portables versus permanent construction. They had a meeting in May. They discussed class size, right? There were teachers and principals and various staff on the committee. They brought in outside consultants. They brought on a woman by the name of Lori Ranieri, who talked about financial advisor for government financial strategies, and she had a lengthy presentation which was included in the materials that are available to the public and presented to the board about options for school funding. Talked about were there any state bonding, right? Remember we talked about this? Were there any state bonds that were available? The answer ultimately for a district like ours is no, as a practical matter. There was really no state funding that was available. Talked about developer fees, that's what we pursued. Talked about community fundraising, which effectively means either parcel taxes or bonds. And then they spent a lot of time talking about the bonding capacity. So they also prepared and submitted a timeline, right? I'm just going to hold this up because I know you can't see it, but this is a timeline and this is available June 21st, 2016. This was in the summary presentation of what the Enrollment Growth Subcommittee presented, and it was also in the materials from the consultant. And really what they talked about, the first things to do, which is to evaluate the facilities needs, which is effectively a lot of what the Enrollment Growth Committee did, and also they talked about developing a facilities master plan, which in light of the needs of the district and enrollment growth and so forth. And so we have taken those steps. And if you continue on in the timeline, it includes evaluation of. Really, this is kind of, I have to say it, but this is kind of where we are. This is, except for the fact that this is focused on, well, these people were retained for the purpose of analyzing bonds, right, and facilities. And what they said is once you do the analysis of sort of your needs and the facilities master plan, it's time to evaluate voters' opinions, right? We do an analytical, independent survey, and you retain people for the purpose of looking at those issues and effectively providing political advice with respect to that. And frankly, I think that's where I do think in the timeline that's sort of where we are now. I think we have other evaluative things that we need to do as a board in terms of deciding what our priorities are, but that is really kind of where we are in this timeline. And, okay, so those were just some of the things. In addition, we got extensive information about enrollment in our feeder districts, right? I don't know if you recall all this, right? There were cohort survival studies, enrollment in our feeder districts, which have been growing by, leaps and bounds over the years. And if you look by, Mill Valley, the numbers especially for the more significant districts that feed into ours are substantial. And we're feeling the effects of it. We're feeling the effects of it now. So one of the points I want to make with regard to this is it's not just the projected impact between now and 2021. It's the cumulative impact of what we're already experiencing now arising from the enrollment growth that we've had over really the last 15 years. So we're not starting at ground zero as if saying we have adequate facilities now and we have to live for another 5 years and then things are going to sort of peter off. We have the cumulative impact of where we are. That's sort of the broader context of the enrollment growth impact. So, I could go on and discuss this. There's a lot of really interesting and information there that we need to kind of remind ourselves of. They also had a report which was report to the committee. Which was provided to us from an organization called California's Coalition for Adequate School Housing. So that was a consultant that the Enrollment Growth Committee retained for the purpose of looking at the issues. And they have it, and they put together a timeline, right? And the timeline was premised at the time on potentially November 2016 election. Obviously, that's come and gone, but the purpose of that is not to focus on November 2016 or 18 or 19 or 20. It's just to get a sense of what sort of the timing is included. And they've got sort of step-by-steps of which effectively echo what the other consultant did, and included within that is, for example, the retainment of enrollment projection specialist, right? that we had an enrollment projection specialist as part of our FMP, and they talk about the FMP, and they talk about, here it is, political strategist, right? Facilities funding consultant, political strategist, voter opinion polling strategist, right? So there's nothing that we're talking about that we haven't been talking about for more than a year. I want to be really clear. So in my opinion, again, I think it's time to get a political strategist on board, provided that we can answer the basic questions about, there's one thing about sort of contractual issues, right? Scope of work, cost, those kinds of things. The question, if we can work through that or not. But in terms of helping to drive our discussion and helping to, I think that this will help us through the decision making of what we need to do. But I think it's incumbent upon us at the same time to say, for example, we need to decide how are we going to prioritize the facilities? What would it look like? Because we can't make this decision about parcel tax versus bond, parcel tax and bond, et cetera, unless really we know what the options are on the facility, these additional options are on the facility side. So, but if we demand that from staff, I don't see why we can't do that in parallel. I just don't see why we can't do it in parallel. And I'm concerned that time is going by. We have elections in June and November of 2018. And if we hire somebody in December, it might be too late for June, but we may find out with political advice that June is the better election for us. I don't know the answer to that. And we're not going to have anybody on staff who's going to know that. So I'm ready to vote for it, or at least, at the very least, I'm ready to vote for it, subject to allocating responsibility to, to the superintendent and Leslie, for example, to get their questions answered with respect to that contract. So we can approve, up to X amount of dollars with respect to the contract, subject to resolving these issues. I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm really concerned about more delay.
No, I thought about this long and hard today and yesterday as I grew more and more uncomfortable, and as I started putting together my own timeline and reflecting on how things have been going. I looked at the scope of work that we got from the pollster back in November, and it was very, very detailed. And one of the things that came out of that meeting was that sometimes there's an advantage to doing a pollster first. He said 40% of the people do it that way, and then get the political consultant if they decide they're going to move forward. It's not one and the same. And when I looked at the scope of the political consultant, I thought, gee, it's not at all clear exactly what they're doing, but I know they're not polling. I'm not interested necessarily in paying somebody to do focus groups if we can do a poll that's cheaper and get more information. But I have to tell you, what made me really turn the corner and say no is exactly what you were pointing out. All the work you did, all the work I did, and we were working in parallel, and I wasn't even looking at that meeting, and there was nobody driving the bus the last year. We all forgot. And if we don't have staff that can get engaged, I'm not going to wait. Each time we thought the next consultant was going to help us get across the finish line, and we haven't. We've moved forward, yes, but until I'm convinced that we have a district that's really going to drive the bus, I'm not ready to hand any more money to another consultant. I'd be more comfortable after we know what we think the scope of work is. We know, and I think that would take time for us to talk through the parcel and bond. And one thing that did come out was some advice we got at the November 15th meeting was that you really don't want to have the two together very close. Then we heard at another meeting that you can expect not to break ground for, I think they said, 3 years after the bond pass. So we have all these tidbits of information, a lot of what you just shared, some of what I'm sharing. If we just put it all on a whiteboard, I think we're all really smart people, and we have a good district staff that can chime in, and we probably could decide, yeah, let's do a parcel tax in 2 years. And then we need the political consultant at that time to say, hey, should we go out in June or November? And we give them a very, very concise, precise question to answer. Right now it's kind of a blah. I just don't think we're focused. And it hasn't worked in the past to say, can we have a timeline? Can you give us this? That hasn't worked in the past. I've tried. And by the way, at the last meeting, I said so many times, I'm not comfortable with this without a scope of work. And Dr. Yoshihara, thank you. You made it very clear. You said, no, you're basically awarding me time to negotiate. I'll bring back the scope of work next time to approve. And I know you can do that. Well, so I'm not approving it. You know, it's not going to be my vote. But I'm not saying get rid of this consultant necessarily. I'm not there yet, but I'm definitely not where, I think we have more work to do to decide what scope, if any, we do give them. But I don't think it's necessarily, I just don't think we're ready. But in the timelines that I looked at from the FMP and from Godsby, you know, it does look like, you know, we could make it to November, as what Chuck was saying, if we started in December. I think it'd be nicer to start earlier than that, but I just think we as a board need to spend more time.
But my point is that November may not be the optimal time.
It may not be, but I don't want to. I feel like I'd be voting to waste money because I'm just not confident in the way we're managing our consultants lately. It's just my personal.
Okay, healthy discussion here. I've been listening, and I'm thinking that we're probably not ready to vote on this tonight, is what I'm hearing from the board up here. There are some questions that need to be answered. And I also think that we need, sooner than later, like next meeting, August 22nd, to have a workshop where we have the whiteboard and we talk about parcel tax or bond and what comes with both of those, and we look at the June 21st, 2016 notes again and all the other information that we have all been privy to. I think that we need to talk about our priorities as board, and we just don't have time to do it. We need to make the time to do it. We might need another regular meeting scheduled. I don't know what your schedules look like, but we might need a huge chunk of time to talk about this. It's a big responsibility of ours, and yeah, I'm frustrated with this whole thing too. I recall all these conversations that we've had, and I think that we keep hoping that everything will fall into place, and it's been very bumpy along the way. I think that we need to have the workshop. I think we need to tell the consultant, ask our questions, specifically about the scope of work. I think that needs to be hammered out a little bit more. And those might be able to happen concurrently. I don't know. We haven't hired them yet, so I don't know how much they're willing to work with us. But I think the priority, from my standpoint, is to get together and talk about which one we want to pursue, or both, and why, and then give that information to our strategist, is where I'm coming from. And I think that's what I'm hearing from. Did I capture that?
Well, I have a question, which is, if we're going to talk about, I think that, right, we still have this choice in front of us. We have these competing interrelated priorities with respect to facilities and with respect to general funds raised from the parcel tax. So we've spent a lot of time in the last year talking about the budget, right? And where we have a sense, certainly, about the reserves and how we've been spending our reserves and what we've done to save money where we can. And we had a lot of discussion about the facilities, but so I feel, well, let me put it this way. I feel like we have less work to do on just sort of the general funds budgetary aspect than we do on the facility side. And by that I mean specifically, if we're going to have a discussion about sort of priorities, then I think we need to be presented with subsets, if you will, alternatives on the facility side. So we know that we've got the $300 million facilities master plan, and we know what that looks like because we have the plan, but we don't know what it would look like if we were prioritizing. I think we need to give direction to staff for this, right? I mean, if we're going to try to set up this workshop to be successful, right, we need to have it'd be great if we could have some information developed prior to having the workshop, right, that we could digest and discuss at the workshop. So, what would those priorities be among that, with respect to all those facilities? So how do we go about having that discussion? Can we give some direction to staff now that would help set up, that would allow them to do the spade work? And frankly, we may have to retain the consultant to do a little more work on that. I don't know the answer to that. The person who did the FMP, how do we come up with that sort of interim steps, right? Because you made a comment. You said Chuck said, I think maybe sometimes they looked at the bonding capacity and then, right, came up with an FMP to that. I don't know that that's true or not. But again, if we're looking at what would a $50 million bond look like, what would we get with it, right? If we were most concerned about sort of what do we really need to do critically, science rooms to deal with next generation science standards, whatever it is, how do we go about getting that information that would help us make that workshop as productive as possible? That's my question.
So that's a question to me. So I do agree that the board needs to have the opportunity to discuss the priorities around a parcel tax and/or bond. The wonder is, if that's done ahead of the consultant or strategist, to what extent is that work duplicative or get to a point where we, staff and the board, get stuck? For example, in the FMP, my recollection is at the last presentation, the priorities were broadly outlined in 4 general areas, and they were color-coded from health and safety on down as per the feedback that they received. And so there is this broad generalization of prioritization. So that can be a starting point for the discussion with the board, and how they choose to go about using those priorities in an informative way to make some decisions on direction. What I won't have the knowledge of is to answer questions that could lead to specific questions around voter sentiment or likelihood of how that would look in terms of a proposal for a bond. For example, the board may say, well, we want this, and this, and this. Would that, could that work? This adds up to some amount of money. Can that work? I wouldn't be able to tell you if that's going to work more than something else, except that one's going to cost more than another. A pollster, through appropriate polling with the community, is going to be able to gauge voter sentiment in terms of how that looks and how that's worded. What we can do as staff is provide guidance in terms of cost and what was shared in terms of priority. The same would be for parcel tax. We can provide guidance in terms of estimation on sizing of a parcel tax to close some specific number of the deficit. And that's the extent to which we could do. So the board can say, well, we think we need to close the deficit by this amount and have this much cushion. So we could say, okay, that's some number. But in terms of the many ways that could look, we wouldn't be able to tell you that. So to the extent that we value your time and move us forward, there's limitations to what staff can do with regards to answering some of those questions for the board, if that helps or makes sense. And so I don't know. I don't know how long and how far you'll get where the board will begin to ask questions, and we'll say, well, we can't answer those. We just don't have that information. Certainly we can look at the prioritization matrices that we're given. We can look at where our parcel taxes sit, how much that generates, and how much we can close with our structural deficit, and give some estimates on sizing. But in terms of, is that good? Is that bad? Should we do more? Should we do less? Those are things that are beyond our ability with regards to polling and determining it. We haven't done that. I know in our brief conversation that Laura and I had with this firm, but I would argue any firm who's done this, they will know with a level of specificity what's needed. I think for me, if I can share, Laura, one of the takeaways I got as we talk about priorities is, let's just say that the board believes the parcel tax, which I'm hearing some of them have said, is the priority. That doesn't mean that that's what you pursue first necessarily. For example, what we learned, or at least what I learned, is when you look at 2018, if you're going to look at higher thresholds, which we know a parcel tax is over a bond, 2020 may be a better time to go out for that, just because, as we know, that's the next general election, 2018 being a mid-year. So therefore, does one go out in 2018 on a parcel tax requiring a higher threshold, or wait until 2020 to go to the parcel tax? And again, people who have done this know those sort of facts right off the top of their head, and say, well, maybe you want to go 2020 because that's a general election, and then 2018 you do a bond because that is a lower threshold, and you know you need it. If you sort of listen to Michael's word that this is not an either or, but it could be an and statement. That doesn't mean the bond is more important, is what the pollster said. It just means that you have decided a strategy to maximize the outcome of success.
You keep referring to a pollster said this. I do remember Godsby saying this. Who were you talked to? Also another pollster?
I'm sorry,
strategist. Oh, the strategist. Okay.
Strategist.
Yeah. No,
who
it's a
shared
good
that
point. Yeah.
And so yes, we can provide some facilitation and guidance to a point, but I worry that we would get stuck. Whereas the strategists have all this, they have this built into sort of their time frame, and those are included in the conversations. They agree as well that it needs to be had. What I'm hearing is if that's had outside of them, then some of that work could be duplicative and or limiting when you get to points where you're asking questions that we can't answer.
I think maybe we could simplify it. My recollection of when she presented as well as Godby, it didn't sound like, I mean, they raised these points, or I remember Godby more than her, but she was saying she needed the first 2 months to do a lot of background evaluation. And during that 2 months was when we were going to try and develop our priority list of projects so that then she could help, because she said she needed to do that background evaluation so she'd know how to even devise
Correct.
the question.
That would be
And
up
then
in the front end, yes.
Right. And Godby said similar, but he gave us a timeline that you would go out and do the pollster first in planning, and then maybe hire a political consultant after or at the same time. So there's different ways. But I think to start, it would be very simple. It's too bad we can't mark on this wall, but mark a timeline by quarter or by semi-annual per year. We ask Mr. Minion to give us an estimate date, and we all don't know it's not exact. We know it might move this way or this way. If when we hit that, whatever we decide, the 10% reserve, and there's a date we're looking at, we know we can't go below that. And then we say to ourselves, gee, how much time do we have between there? We've been told that if we hit that, our teachers, we're going to have to do layoffs, and we know we won't do that. So we need to have cash in hand that date. So then we put a little marker there and say the month before that, we better pass a parcel tax. And what date is that? Oh, okay. Then we look at the bond. And maybe we don't even have to decide the dollar value, but we can say, well, we can, as a board, that's where we can start having discussion of what are we going to highlight. And yeah, then we go back. That's our scope of work. We start developing what questions do we need answered. And then we have a very defined set of questions for whether we may decide we go, I don't know, she said that we were going to hire our own pollster on the side and hire her. Maybe we decide we do a pollster first, then her. I don't know. But right now, I want to hear more from Chuck with his ideas. I want to hear more from Michael. And if we get stuck, we get stuck, because God knows we've been stuck already. It's going to happen. And you're not going to have an answer, and that's okay. We're going to ask you a question, and you're not going to be able to answer, and that's okay. That's going to go on the whiteboard where we go, this is a question that we want an answer to. We need an expertise to do that. But not to do anything and then have another consultant come in. I just think can we just have some time, just another few weeks to flesh this out? Because we may decide we have to have money cash in hand 2021. Otherwise, we're going to lay off teachers. That's a huge piece of information to work around.
I think the dilemma that I struggle is and I know you've asked this before, and And the dilemma on that is that there is no single answer for that. If anything, the answer is it depends. And
No,
it
I
depends on a
know.
lot of
Yeah.
things. So,
Yeah.
so part of the dilemma with a budget is it's, at least when it's presented to the board, it's a static document based upon a condition in time. So if we were to say, and as the board is aware, back in June when this was adopted, we were certified positive through the next 3 years, but it continues to decline. And if we're saying, okay, well, let's pick a point where, you know, we're uncomfortable, whatever that point is, right? 3, 4, 5 years out. Again, that's just based upon all of the current conditions. And so one of the things that is very important to that is that includes no negotiated settlements. And so if you say we pick a point 4 years out, we're going to be bargaining with our groups for 4 more years between now and then, which is not included in those projections. So any increase makes that more difficult. And so the challenge that I face is we've picked a point that has changed rather quickly. And so I'm not sure how to give a specific answers to what that looks like, I guess.
You
I'm
can't,
struggling.
and we know you can't. That's why this is hard. We have a date, and we know it could swing either way, but we got to do something. And if it swings in our direction, we get more, yay! But if it doesn't, we will at least be getting the ball rolling and getting moving. Otherwise, we won't do anything because we're never going to have a figure that we have, high confidence in. I mean, we got to do something. I mean, what's the alternative? Of course, you're not. We understand that. You just tell us what the variables are that could change, and we know that we've certainly lived through that already. Seeing the date move of when we think we might hit the cliff, as we've called it. So that's okay. Give us the number and tell us what's not included and what the uncertainties are. And we're all aware of the uncertainties of what could happen. Just like when Chuck talks about the earthquake. I mean, we all know these things can happen. Political strategists can't tell us that either, though. So we need to focus on something. I don't think that's uncommon. That's always the case when you're looking at revenue. I mean, companies, you're never quite sure. You know that things can change. And I think it's okay.
I know she was waiting. She referenced Chuck to say something, so I didn't want to interrupt.
A pollster or political strategist may be able to tell us that it's more propitious to go out for a bond in 2018 and a parcel tax in 2020. But the thing I keep getting back to is that the failure to pass a parcel tax will be catastrophic. Mm-hmm. The failure to pass a bond will lead to mediocrity and a lot of discomfort. Mm-hmm. But it won't be catastrophic. Failure to get a parcel tax will be catastrophic. So I don't think we need to have a political pollster tell us what's more propitious. It's we're dealing with what's necessary, and I think we can the process of determining what we need in a parcel tax should be from the ground up here. Not top down from a pollster telling us, well, we can, the chances are 62% that will, the voters will approve this, or 88% that they'll approve that. We need to figure out, what we need to close that deficit. We need to, the board needs to make some kind of broad determination as to, how much money we should throw in there for staff pay increases. We have a staff that's been losing ground for 10 years. For me, that's a huge priority. We need to be able to compensate our staff. And we can determine that. We can determine, what we're going to need. We look at the projections. The costs are going, the costs are going up, and then the enrollment's going up and then tailing off. The property values will keep creeping up. At some point in the future, the lines will cross. We need something to tide us over until those lines cross. And again, I just put a really high priority on adequate pay for our staff.
Okay. David, did you have any response to any of this?
I mean, I certainly, if it helps and we can move the board forward, I want to be able to help in that process. What I hear is the board needs some dedicated time to review the priorities as it relates to, for lack of a better term, scoping on a parcel tax, i.e., how much do we want to give, for lack of a better term. I'm not saying that's a give, but how much do we want to give for future costs, and to some extent, the role of the facilities and what are the priorities for the board, and if the board can determine those, then they will be in a better position to provide direction as it relates to a strategist and a pollster and the work that they will do. I see some nodding, so I'm just paraphrasing what I think I hear. And sooner, better than later, certainly on that. And I'm available. I do know that we have 5 people who have complicated calendars, so
we'll need staff to help prepare the materials, or
yeah, to the extent that we know the questions ahead of time, certainly. If not, we will do our best in terms of trying to predict what we've heard to prepare for the board. Certainly the next board meeting is in 2 weeks. That's pretty quick anyway, I would argue. And those are ones that are well noticed, so the public certainly knows there's a board meeting coming in 2 weeks. And so I think in the spirit of transparency, we certainly can plan and utilize a significant time at that board meeting to have this conversation, either earlier that day or at the same time. I mean, we've been judicious in our ability to try to maximize the time that we all know the board has set aside. So I can certainly work with Leslie and Laura in terms of determining that. Those have been my 2 folks over, so that's what I'm hearing.
how does that sit with board?
That we're going to have more expanded time on the August 22nd meeting that's already publicly noted, to
Yes.
be able to discuss and create these priorities.
Take a deeper dive and come up with priorities and drive the conversation with the strategist if that's what we decide to go with. And I think that as far as the strategist goes, the item on the agenda, we're not ready to vote tonight on this item.
Do we just table it, or do we vote no, knowing it'll come back in a different form?
Table it, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was just a question procedurally. What do you do? Do you say,
Table.
because I'm voting against this contract the way it is. You're not going to convince me to vote for it.
But if we table it and we modify it, questions are answered and it comes back to the board.
They're not going to answer a question that's going to make me ever vote for giving them $20,000. I can tell you that right now, ever. I'm positive.
But I heard Chuck say that we need a unanimous vote if we're going to go forward with a strategist.
Doesn't have to
I
be
think
this
so.
one.
have to be.
Right.
It could be somebody else.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. I guess
So
if
I think
can-
I think we ought to table this motion, right?
There's
And
no
we
motion. Yeah, there's no motion.
well, then I'll move to table the consideration of the contract with instructions to take back to the consultants, right?
Yeah.
Have further discussion with the consultants with respect to the concerns that have been raised by the board members, and bring it back at a time when, with the idea being that we would bring it back at a time when the board is ready to evaluate it again, and maybe that means after. Right? I mean, that's what people are saying, right? You don't want to make a decision on this until after we have our discussion. Is that what everybody's saying? right? So
Yeah, I mean, I could vote no for this contract, but it doesn't mean I'm not open to looking at something else.
Yes, but I don't see
And
the
so
purpose.
I don't know that, that's what, I'm just saying
I don't see the
procedurally,
I don't see
know.
the purpose of voting no. You made your, I mean, in terms of the
Yeah, so
points
by-
that you've
by
made
just
substantively.
tabling it, it's fine. Yeah, it was just a procedural question I had.
And I guess for me, as a point of clarification, to certainly work with Leslie, and I think it's fair for me to go back to them again as a superintendent to negotiate this contract with them, right? Because it is a negotiation. So if what I hear is uncomfortable with the amount of agreement, I can certainly go back and say, propose some other number, right? Some lower number or whatnot on each of the different points that you brought up, and they may say okay, and they come back with some different agreement. My hope is that I can work with you to continue to have that dialogue, right? If they come back with some number other than 20, let's say, right, and they come back with 10, I'm making this up. If that's still not uncomfortable, it would help for me to know what is
Zero.
the comfort zone.
I really,
Okay.
I will
that's,
not.
and that's
I mean,
fair.
and that-
I mean, that's fair.
It's my bottom line. I know I might be the only one voting that way, but I will not approve any. I will not vote for a contract that has that kind of clause in it. That's a government contract.
Okay.
I just won't.
And that's helpful for me to know.
Yeah, and same with the 1.5%. I won't approve that.
And that's fair.
Yeah,
and so my question is hopefully if we can get to a point where you can share that feedback with me, and they say, and I don't know that, right? But they may say, I'm good with that. We'll charge no
Yeah,
fees.
and so I just shared it with you.
Yeah.
So it's good.
So
you have
as we
it.
go down the
Yeah.
list, I hope to be able to do that in each of those areas and get to a point where at least it answers your questions. And whether they can do it or not do it is up to them, right? They may say,
Right.
we can't do it. And that's
And you might have 4 other board members that vote for it. It's just,
Yeah.
so, I mean, that's the nature of the process. So I'm just
Absolutely.
giving you my own singular opinion of what I would vote for or nay, but Section 2, the scope, I won't have any feedback until we have our workshop and really define as a board what questions we need answered.
okay. That
Okay.
helps.
So I heard a motion to table this item. And Michael, the motion was repeat your
Just to
motion.
table it. I think
Table
that's
it.
all that we need to say in
Okay.
terms of the motion.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Right. And we will work with Laura and Leslie as directed it for the next meeting to have that. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Item C, approve proposed TAM adult school wage rate increase.
Good evening. Per our conversation at the July 18th board meeting, we bring to you with a recommendation for approval, a approximate 3% salary increase for our Tamalpais adult school teachers. A couple of salient points to remember. These folks are not represented by any bargaining association. This wage increase will not impact the general fund, as adult school is a separate funding source. Because we pay these people by the hour, we're actually proposing $1 per hour rate increase, which equates to approximately 3%. And there are 3 levels of hourly rate that we're looking to increase by $1. There is an attachment in your packet, I believe, with a memorandum I wrote in early July outlining all of this. And again, we respectfully ask for your approval for this wage increase, which mirrors the increase of both bargaining associations, management, and confidential employees.
Do we have any questions for Lars?
I have a question, and you'll have to help me with my memory. I think it was at the last meeting, and it might have been Corey DeMars that spoke, and was the concern that the threshold that we were starting at was pretty low to begin with, and should we consider more of it a raise? Is my memory?
I think your memory is correct, and Corey can help out too, and Corey did make that statement. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he did.
Okay.
I did do a little digging after we had the conversation, and we are in line or above what other like adult schools are paying their employees. We're not paying less than other districts in the general area. As you recall, most districts no longer offer adult education. We have continued to do so, but the ones that still have it.
Yeah, no, it sounded kind of funny.
Yeah,
but there's no one else offering.
They're paying what we're paying or a bit less.
Any other questions for Lars? Is there any public comment on this item?
Just a point before I vote to approve it. Just because the industry standard is low doesn't justify us having a low wage.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. I do know that Corbett Elson, the adult school principal, though, has done significant examination of his budget with Daniel Menyon, and he feels comfortable with the 3%. He would not feel comfortable going higher at this point, given his other budgetary needs.
Any other questions from the board? I saw. Yes.
I just have a quick question. Do we know how long it's been since they had a raise?
We raised the salary not that long ago. It was actually during my tenure. So I want to say it's about a year and a half ago.
That raise that was recently done was after a long period of no raises.
Yeah. It'd been about 10 years, I think, prior to that.
And that percentage was, do you recall?
I'd have to go back and look, Corey. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head. But call me tomorrow and I can dig it up.
I'm not trying to complicate this. I'm always concerned that teachers are not getting paid.
Yeah. It was a sizable increase because there were so many years without increase.
Yeah.
And so
It was roughly a decade, I know that. But I can give you the exact figures in the morning if you call me. After my dentist appointment.
It's only a $5,000.
Yeah, there's a approximate $5,000 impact to the adult school budget from 160 to 165.
Okay. No additional public comment or question. Any discussion up here? I think this is, we talked about it last time, so I'd entertain a motion to approve the proposed wage increase for TAM adult school teachers.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next item is item D, first reading of revision to board policy and administrative regulation 5141.21.
Members, we got a series of board policies here tonight. We'll, I think like last time, take them all together. If there are questions around the first or second one, Dr. Topia is here tonight to help with those. But otherwise, like in the last time, these do come back for second reads if there are any questions on them. So, yes, Barbara.
I have a question. Who administers now that we have wellness, we have nurses and such, who is considered trained school staff at this point for deliverance of these medications like naloxone?
It would be nurses and health techs. And as far as EpiPens go, depending on the severity of the allergy, every teacher who has a student with that severe allergy in their class is also trained on the EpiPen.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. I read the attachment approving Tamalpais Union High School District's response to opioid drug use, revising a district policy. It was like the background information, I think.
Yeah.
And I can't seem to find where I marked it up, but there was one, darn, I wish I could find it. Maybe I'll look while other people are asking questions. But there was one paragraph that said that if the policy passed, that we'd also be approving more, not curriculum, but more a program in the Wellness Center for Stress Reduction. It was like they threw this other...
$20,000.
20,000.
Yeah, and it just felt like it was kind of like pulling a fast one, even though I'm sure that wasn't the intent. And I was a little concerned, too, by the way it was written, because I just wasn't really comfortable with it.
The background information was part of a study that some of our the students who were student nurses who had worked in our wellness program had done.
Yeah,
that was just background information. It's not, we are not asking for any additional funding. I think the recommendation was to increase potential, services in wellness, but that is not part of the actual policy that was presented.
Yeah, I think I just would encourage the district when they put something like this in a board packet to realize that it's now coming from the district. And reading it, some of it read a little bias. I mean, it just didn't read, we even cited the public health physician for the county, and if he's being cited as a communication, it wasn't referenced correctly. And if we're going to do that as a district, it's a district doing this. doesn't matter that it's a nursing student, and it'd be good to ask him to review it to make sure he's being quoted accurately. It did read like a graduate student or an undergrad. So I just get concerned about why even put that in the packet, because I think it kind of misrepresents us.
I think that's a valid concern. I had questions about that, that document. Wondering about the evaluation objectives 1 and 2, and had they been vetted. And I heard back from staff that it was just supposed to be a backup document, but I can see how the public, now it's going to be it's out there. You know, we didn't approve that UCSF study, so maybe some disclaimer or something down the road. Does anyone have any other questions on this particular? I did have a question.
Yeah, I do. You know, with the Narcan, you know, who would we be considering? You know, who would be the people administering it? You know, who would get the training for it? Who would?
Again, those would be health techs, and nurses would likely be potentially administrators. I don't know exactly what the training protocol is. I can ask Wes to bring that forward. It's you know, it would depend on how the Narcan. I don't know how the Narcan is administered at this point. But you know, as in EpiPens, it depends on, you know, with EpiPens, all staff can be trained to use them. With Narcan, it would most likely be a health tech, a nurse, someone like that.
With these sort of things, when you have lay people who are briefly trained to do stuff, there's this idea called barrier to action. Oftentimes, you'll see people in cardiac arrest and a whole bunch of people standing around, all of them having been trained in CPR, and they freeze and they don't know how to do something. I mean, I have seen a school nurse freeze and not provide treatment. So, you know, I wonder, you know, about the efficacy of these training programs. And I wonder too, you know, on a national basis, you know, what is the prevalence of high school students having opioid overdoses on school property during school hours?
You know, they are rising is the answer to that. You know, what the percentage is in Marin County, I can't respond to. And I understand your point that sometimes the training is minimal. These are, you know, Narcan is desperate life-saving measure. You know, it is literally an attempt to save somebody's life in the moment. So, you know, and as I said, it doesn't have any adverse effects even if the person wasn't overdosing. So it seems like a sort of a much more safety, you know, it's one of those things we'd rather have it than not on site, just in case. Hopefully we don't ever have to deal with that. If you've read the New York Times recently, you know, a massive article about the increase in opioid addiction among 18 to 25-year-olds.
Yeah, I'm curious too, is why they would be requesting $20,000 to train people to administer a drug which you say has no side effects, but does anyone ask for $20,000 for EpiPens, which do have side effects?
I think I read it that the $20,000 was for materials, like educational materials, and not to train staff. I don't know.
No, yeah, I mean,
No,
yeah, but
right.
you know, why was there no
part of this.
$20,000 for EpiPens? You know, which you really don't want to be administering you know, epinephrine to someone who doesn't need it.
I was really surprised, Tara, when I read this, that this EpiPen and glucagon and anti-seizure medication, I know we were compliant before, but it's been since 2011 that we've reviewed this particular BPAR. I'm really surprised that it wasn't mandatory way back when in 2011 to have these, have on-site people trained in how to administer these medications?
Yeah, I mean, they were on site back then. It's just the policy hasn't been updated. I don't know what the law was at that time. Again, but we have had EpiPen training on site since before 2011. And I know that I did it as both a teacher and as a administrator.
Okay, so I'm just reading the revisions bring the policies current with changes in state law. So I was thinking
Yeah.
maybe that, this is being brought to us because of changes in state law. And I'm surprised that it wasn't a law long ago.
I don't know that it wasn't a law. The law, they make changes to the law as it goes, so there are some adjustments we need to make sure that our policy is meeting the new standards of the law. So they add new drugs to the law, they add new procedures to the law. So we do follow updates and update our policy as those come out.
I'm glad we're doing this. Okay, this is not an action item.
No, this is a first read.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this first read of 5141.21?
Nope.
Anything from the audience? Yep. You're gonna have to sprint to the mic. You and Cindy are both coming in hot.
In reference to who would be able to administer, specifically the opioid medication, I'm concerned to hear that it would be nurses or health techs, because two of our schools don't have ready access to either of them, and that's Tamascal and San Andreas. But actually, I'm sorry.
I don't know.
I was about to say that. It actually says in the write-up on the third page of it in red, that it's any school staff who volunteers to administer it as long as they're trained by medical personnel. And the particular medicine we're talking about is intranasal, so it's not an injection.
Yeah.
So I was relieved to see that indeed it didn't have to be a health tech or a nurse. It could be just whoever's trained at the site. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I know you weren't sure of that, but okay, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Cindy Hall. My comment was basically the same, that I had a concern if it had to be a health specialist or nurse, because we don't have one at our site every day. But we do have classified staff who are backup nurse and backup to the backup nurse. But I also just wanted to let you know that at least the last 2 years at Redwood High School, almost every secretary in addition was trained on an EpiPen and to aid a student who was having a diabetic seizure. And they asked us if we wanted it, and we all did, because many times students will come into our office, looking for help, and we felt that we needed to be first responders, and the response was overwhelming of the people that were trained. So I don't know about the other medication for the nasal spray, but I'm willing to be trained because that's what we do. So I look forward to that coming forward.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one? Okay.
Well, I just, to what Cindy just said, it points out what our classified staff has consistently, reliably done, and that is go the extra mile. I'd never heard it, I didn't know that, and that's common. We don't know it, we don't hear about it. I'm glad to have heard about it, but again, to praise our classified staff who just do it because they care about the kids. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item E. 6161.1, selection of instructional materials.
Same as before, nothing to add. The first read, if the board has questions, we'd be happy to.
There's a typo at the bottom of page bottom of page 3 of the red line of the BP, whatever BP stands for, board policy. It says sue, but it should be use.
Oh, yeah, materials to sue in class.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you look for it, if you do a
We
search.
won't sue, but we'll use.
Exactly.
We'll adjust.
Yeah, you won't sue, but you
Exactly.
Thank you.
That's my contribution to the discussion.
That was a good one.
I didn't go back and check to see. I saw it on the red line, so I assumed that it was also on the clean version of it. But I think I did check the AR, and I think the language was different enough in the AR that I didn't see it. But you can do a find in Word and see if it appears anywhere else.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this item? Oh, thought you were raising your hand. Just put your glasses. All right. Okay, let's move on to F. This is BP and AR 3230 federal grant funds. This is a new mandated policy. Any questions from the board? Any public comment? Okay. Item G, 3270 sale and disposal of, just says sale and disposal. Any questions on this? Public comment? Okay, moving on down. No, that one was no longer needed, right? Then we have first reading of Board Policy 6154, homework and makeup work.
H, we have H. Right?
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Where's H? Oh, skipped right over it, sorry.
3512.
3512. That's the one that's no longer needed, I'm sorry, I was not reading it right. Any questions on this one?
So the BP is no longer needed. The AR is what's being introduced, just for clarification.
Oh, okay.
AR 3512 is new.
Yes.
Okay.
Meaning we don't have an existing AR.
All right, do we have any public comment on this item H? All right, now we're on I. 6154, homework and makeup work. This was last revised in 1993.
That is correct.
Wow.
Any questions from the board on this one?
So my only observation is that we're heading into the season of the Jewish holidays, and this is like right on the issue of people being absent, students being absent for those reasons, and would like the opportunity. Teachers should understand that they have an obligation, apparently, but certainly the kids have an opportunity to do makeup work with respect to tests and scheduling, and so. I believe that we have a communication that goes out to teachers right in anticipation of that. So give some consideration to whether, some of this language in here is potentially relevant or useful as you think about communicating with teachers with respect to this issue.
Thank you.
Correct.
Any public comment on this item, 6154? Okay, let's go to J. First reading of AR 6173.3, the juvenile court school students. Questions?
How many students do we have in the TAM district who end up in juvenile hall for any given period of time during the school year? Does anybody know? It's it's got to be really little. The place is always empty.
And like CYA? Or
just the hall.
No, just in the local juvenile.
Local juvenile.
Last year San Andreas had 2, and we're typically the school that they would transition into. So we had 2 last year.
Oh, okay.
Do you have the obviously less of Providence San Andreas because the way your credits work, but do you have an issue of kids coming back with just weird credits in stuff that doesn't help them get closer to graduation?
Can you ask Corey to answer at the microphone so that the people who are, the thousands and thousands of people who are watching these can hear your input?
Chuck, it's not so much that they come back with credits in places that don't matter much, it's that they come back with little credit in important places. So it's typically,
Yeah.
juvenile hall is notorious for giving 1.33 credit in most of the classes they do. The classes are reasonable ones and they apply to our grad requirements. The credits are very low though, so typically students coming in are credit deficient.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
I don't think this board policy will solve that, but.
Okay, any public comment on this item? All right, we pulled 3 items. Thank you, Dr. Yoshihara.
Thank you. We'll bring that back next.
Come back. The first item that we pulled off of consent was A, the minutes from July 18th, and we heard some public comment on that, and I believe we had
A correction.
a correction. So,
Yeah, I have a correction too. I don't know if you got it already.
what was your correction?
The spelling, last name.
Oh, the spelling.
Golub, not Galub.
Okay. Got
That was
that?
it.
And then item I, we better make sure it's not a, yeah, it is item I. And then I have a second comment. Item I, last sentence, says the board unanimously selected Chuck Ford and Barbara Owens to serve on the subcommittee for the staff.
So it should be Leslie and Chuck.
Right.
Thank you, okay.
Oh, I didn't see that.
And then just a general comment, thank you. These meeting summaries get, it's definitely improved, but I think we may still want to consider, every time we try and start quoting one board member, there's no way of doing it thoroughly, and then other board members don't get quoted, and sometimes quotes are wrong, but I do prefer the approach of the general discussion, so then the community can go back and look at the tape if they choose to, because it's kind of an all or nothing with these meeting summaries. And then as a follow-up, I think we do have to be aware that while this is a board meeting, these are public meeting summaries, and from time to time we are going to probably not hit the mark exactly, so we can adjust them. That's why they go out draft first. And I think it just sheds a light on the fact that it's better if we can provide more information to the community in other venues than them trying to find time to look at a video, which I don't know who would want to do that, and then go to the meeting summary. So I look forward to, I know staff is very busy, but for instance, the information that Michael Futterman and myself and others shared about all the work we've done, if we just had a flow chart on the website showing this, it would sure relieve a lot of questions by the community. And then another thing that often helps, which I've seen work really well, is that when you especially have something that's controversial, you can put on the website, it could even be as little as four items, and one would say, stay tuned. Winter of 2018, January, we plan to approve blah, or we're going to decide if we're going out for a parcel tax. That's when it's going to happen. And then you change it if it changes. But it's so that people aren't always wondering, well, what have I missed? And then it's just a little more transparent. We got to look at ways that don't take staff too much time, but we use the website and maybe start emails for broadcast emails for people that really want to know about one topic. There's ways to do this that it doesn't take a lot of staff time, but we're sharing all the good work the district is doing, and you, Dr. Yoshihara, but then we don't have the community getting so confused with where we are. I think we've all been reading the misconception that somehow we'd all decided to go forward with a $450 million bond, and we never did. So the more we can do that, I think it's going to help. It'll be less time by staff, and us going back and saying, no, that's not what we're doing. And in the long run, I think it makes for the community feel more comfortable. So I do appreciate the public comment. It made me think about that more, that maybe we could collectively think of how we do that.
We had public comment on
Consent already. On the consent, yeah.
the consent. Yeah, no, thinking about the statistic that was quoted on page 5.
And I did watch the tape. I read your letter, and I did watch the tape. And I do have to clarify. Michael did actually say from early on, you were clear.
I'll tell you exactly what I said.
Yeah,
I said it was between the years 2013-14 to 2021-22.
Yeah, and it's on tape. So I think we can adjust
There's
that
an
here.
increase of 35%.
Yeah, and
So-
I think but our minutes weren't really clear, so it's an easy fix.
So what do you want it to say? That it's between those years?
2013-14
Yeah,
to 2021, there's
yeah,
an
it's a
increase.
projected
increase
Yeah.
of 35%.
Yeah.
Fine.
And I think, yeah.
Did you get that, Mary?
Okay, you want page 5 to read that between 13-14 and 2021, there was a projected increase of 35%
An enrollment.
in enrollment. Well, yeah, I mean, that section there, okay, so we're gonna add the part about the years, the span of time.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the minutes? Any other changes? Okay, then we need to approve them. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes with the changes that Mary has noted?
So moved.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next item is G, approve dynamic solutions for youth memorandum of understanding. I think, Barbara, you pulled this.
I do. Tara, number 1, what is the evaluation for this program? And number 2 and 3 would be, how many students have actually been served, and in what manner? How many? Does one-on-one mean they met for one meeting and then it's counted? I'd like to know how many students are served.
So,
you may not be able to answer
I don't
that
know
now.
the exact number. So each month we get an accounting. Keith turns in a roster of students that he met with and how many times and for how long. So sometimes it can be just one meeting with one student, but normally it's ongoing meetings. It's most often in small groups. This year, Keith and I met and talked about really focusing on increasing attendance as going to be one of the metrics we're going to look at moving forward with the students he works with.
Okay. In terms of evaluation of this program, how is that done?
Well, it hasn't really been done very effectively. We haven't, Keith turns in a report every year, but, it's been something that we've been working on with him, and we're hoping to improve. And I guess the idea around attendance was something that was very tangible, that is very easy to actually look at specifically, attendance, referral rates, things like that, decreasing with the students he works with.
Are these agencies aware that we are interested and that we are looking at how they do perform?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a broader question. You're actually a comment. I'd like to see sometime in the not too distant future a report on the scope of our efforts with restorative justice. We embarked on it a few years ago, but it's, the board is generally unaware of what's going on in that field. I understand that we're not really using the youth court anymore. And I just, curious what we are doing.
We're not? I didn't even know that. We're not using youth court anymore?
We have made some referrals. Youth court, we got a legal opinion. Youth court costs money.
Okay.
And there's been some concern in the past that parents weren't aware of the sliding scale. They weren't told that up front. They had to ask for that information. Some parents felt that they had to pay for this to get the student out of the trouble. There's been some issues. We've had some issues. And so the fact that it costs money, in the state of California, you cannot require something that costs money. Obviously, it's an alternative. So we're still working on ways around that.
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it costs money.
Yeah. It's a sliding scale, but it does cost
But
some
still,
money.
There's something, That's unfortunate.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the DSY MOU?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is that an aye, Barbara?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I with a sigh.
And then item I is the MOU with Huckleberry.
Yes, and my question there is similar. I think that it was the 21 hours, and then when I looked at the, I think it was the attachment that I looked at, they've got to go to meetings, they're involved with SARB, they're involved with wellness. What does 21 hours a week cover? I mean, if we want to focus on individual counseling with students, it seems like that number could, I mean, it's just, I just don't see any accountability for that number.
Most of their time on campus is spent with students, in counseling.
Okay.
Mhm.
Again, do we know how many students are served typically?
I don't know that number off the top of my head, but I can. We do know the number of students served. I can get that number for you.
When we approve these, I think that kind of information up front, if it's not private, and I don't think we're breaching any confidentiality, that would be helpful.
Sure. I mean, what I can tell you is that we had a waiting list for their services at the sites.
Well, does that suggest that 21 hours is not enough then?
I would have to ask Wes to respond to that. He's really worked very closely with them. I think he's pretty thoughtful about the way he comes up, and he's also considering budget and that, Huckleberry, the funding has changed. So we had to pick up more of the funding for Huckleberry. They used to be partially funded by the county, and they no longer are.
Oh. Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we need a motion to approve the Huckleberry MOU.
I move we approve the Huckleberry Youth Services MOU.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're done, right?
It is 8:25.
Meeting adjourned.